What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved comedy legends walks onto a morning talk show expecting a pleasant conversation, only to face a host determined to tear him down in front of millions? In just 29 seconds of one particular exchange, Lorraine Kelly's condescending attitude would push Eugene Levy to do something he'd never done before: walk off a live television set. The morning started like any other on The Lorraine Kelly Show. The studio lights blazed overhead, the audience settled into their seats, and the production team ran through their final checks. Eugene Levy, known for his warmth and graciousness in every interview he'd ever given, sat in the guest chair wearing his signature thick-rimmed glasses and a comfortable blazer. He had come to talk about his latest project, expecting the kind of friendly chat he'd experienced countless times before on talk shows around the world. Lorraine Kelly swept onto the set with her usual confident stride, settling into her host chair with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sitting alongside her were two regular panelists: James, an entertainment journalist known for his cutting commentary, and Sophie, a lifestyle blogger who rarely challenged anyone but loved to pile on when the moment arose. "So, Eugene Levy," Lorraine began, pronouncing his last name with an exaggerated emphasis that immediately felt off. "You're here promoting another one of your comedy projects. Tell me, do you ever get tired of playing the same character over and over again?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the warm welcome they'd expected. Eugene's eyebrows raised slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Well, Lorraine, I think what you're referring to is a certain comedic sensibility that I bring to roles, but each character I play has their own unique qualities, and," he started to explain. Yes, but let's be honest," Lorraine interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "You've made quite a career out of playing the awkward dad type, haven't you? Some might say it's become a bit predictable." James leaned forward, sensing his cue to join in. "I think what Lorraine is getting at, Eugene, is that audiences today are looking for more range. We've seen you do the same befuddled expression for, 40 years now?" Eugene's smile remained, but there was a tightness around his eyes. "I appreciate the feedback, but I think if you actually watch the body of work, you'll find there's quite a bit of variation in the characters I've portrayed. From my early days on television to films like Best in Show and A Mighty Wind, each role has had distinct characteristics." "Oh, come now," Sophie chimed in with a little laugh. "They're all basically the same, though, aren't they? The nervous man with the big eyebrows who looks perpetually confused." The audience was silent now. This wasn't the playful banter that usually characterized morning talk shows. This felt mean-spirited. Eugene shifted in his seat, his professionalism still intact. "I'm not sure I agree with that assessment, but everyone's entitled to their opinion." Lorraine leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with an air of superiority. "Let's talk about something else then. Your son Dan has become quite successful with Schitt's Creek. That must be difficult for you, being overshadowed by your own child's success." The question landed like a slap. Eugene's expression changed from patient politeness to visible discomfort. "I'm incredibly proud of Dan," Eugene said, his voice measured but firm. "Schitt's Creek was a collaborative effort, and I was privileged to work alongside him as both a co-creator and actor. There's no overshadowing happening. It's a shared success." "But surely," Lorraine pressed, leaning forward with faux concern, "there must be some part of you that feels a bit jealous? After all, he's won multiple awards for that show, and your individual accolades have been, shall we say, more modest?" James nodded enthusiastically. "That's a fair question. I mean, the son surpassing the father is a classic narrative. Must sting a bit, Eugene." Eugene's jaw tightened. "I don't think you're hearing me. I'm proud of my son. I'm proud of the work we did together. There's no competition between us. And I find the suggestion that there should be, quite frankly, insulting." "Touchy subject, clearly," Sophie said with a smirk, exchanging glances with Lorraine. Lorraine waved her hand again, that same dismissive gesture. "Let's not get defensive, Eugene. We're just having an honest conversation here. You've had a long career, certainly, but one might argue that you've coasted on the same shtick for decades. When was the last time you really challenged yourself as an actor?" The audience began to murmur. A few people looked around uncomfortably, wondering if this was some kind of planned confrontation for ratings. Eugene took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "Lorraine, I came here today to talk about my current project and to have what I hoped would be a respectful conversation. Instead, I'm being attacked for my body of work, my relationship with my son, and my choices as an artist. I'm not sure what I've done to deserve this treatment. Oh, don't play the victim? Lorraine shot back, her voice sharp. You're a public figure who's made millions playing the same role repeatedly. If you can't handle a bit of honest critique, perhaps you shouldn't be doing publicity tours. Honest critique? Eugene repeated, his voice rising slightly for the first time. This isn't critique. This is an ambush. You've invited me onto your show under false pretenses and turned it into some kind of attack session. James jumped in again, clearly emboldened by Lorraine's aggression. I think you're being oversensitive, Eugene. These are questions that many critics have asked. About your career, the fact that you're reacting so strongly suggests maybe there's some truth to them. Yeah, Sophie added. If you were secure in your work, you wouldn't be getting so upset. Eugene looked from one panelist to another, then back to Lorraine. His face was flushed now, but his voice remained steady. I've been doing interviews for over 40 years. I've answered tough questions. I've dealt with skeptical journalists. I've had healthy debates about my work. But what's happening here isn't journalism. It's not even entertainment. It's just cruel. Lorraine laughed, actually laughed, a sharp sound that echoed through the studio. Cruel? Oh, Eugene, you really are as sensitive as the characters you play. We're having a discussion. If you can't handle the heat, maybe morning television isn't for you. Maybe your show isn't for me, Eugene replied, his voice quiet but firm. The studio went completely silent. Lorraine's smile faltered for just a moment, before returning, harder than before. Excuse me? She said, her tone icy. Eugene stood up slowly, removing the small microphone clipped to his lapel. I said maybe your show isn't for me. I've been in this industry long enough to know the difference between a challenging interview and being disrespected. This is the latter. Sit down, Eugene, Lorraine commanded, her voice sharp. We're live. You can't just walk off. Watch me, Eugene said simply. James looked panicked now. Eugene, come on, man. Don't be so dramatic. We're just having a conversation. A conversation requires mutual respect, Eugene replied, carefully placing his microphone on the chair. That's something that's been entirely absent from this exchange. Sophie tried a different approach, her voice suddenly sweet. Eugene, please. Let's start over. We didn't mean to upset you. Eugene looked at her for a long moment. Yes, you did. That was exactly the point, wasn't it? To get a 7 at now reaction, to create a viral moment, to boost your ratings at someone else's expense. Well, congratulations. You've gotten your moment. Lorraine stood up now too, her face red. How dare you? I've been hosting the show for years. I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities, and not once has anyone walked out. Who do you think you are? I'm someone who values dignity, Eugene answered. Mine and others. And I won't sit here and be insulted for your entertainment. You're being ridiculous, Lorraine snapped. We asked you a few hard questions, and you're throwing a tantrum like a child. Eugene paused, turning back to face her directly. The studio cameras captured every second, and the audience sat frozen, unable to look away from the unfolding drama. Lorraine, if you truly believe that what happened here today was just a few hard questions, then I feel sorry for every guest who sits in that chair. Because what I experienced was something else entirely. It was disrespect disguised as journalism. It was cruelty disguised as honesty, and I won't participate in it. Fine, Lorraine said, crossing her arms. Leave then. Run away. That's very professional of you. What's unprofessional? Eugene said, his voice still calm despite the situation, is inviting someone onto your show and then spending the entire interview trying to tear them down. What's unprofessional is encouraging your panelists to pile on with insults. What's unprofessional is confusing meanness with entertainment. James tried one more time. Eugene, you're making a big mistake. This is going to look terrible for you. Eugene actually smiled at that, a sad smile. You know what? I've spent decades building a career on kindness, on collaborative work, on lifting others up. If walking away from this looks terrible, I'll take that over staying and pretending this is acceptable. The audience, which had been silent throughout most of the confrontation, suddenly began to applaud. It started with one person, then another, then more, until a significant portion of the studio audience was clapping. Some even stood up. Lorraine's face went from red to pale. Sit down, she hissed at the audience. This isn't, we're still, just sit down. But the applause continued. Eugene looked out at the audience, genuinely surprised by their support. He nodded gratefully, then turned back to Lorraine one final time. "I hope you'll think about what happened here today," he said quietly. "I hope you'll consider whether this is really the kind of show you want to host, the kind of environment you want to create. Because everyone watching at home, everyone in this audience, they can see what this was. And it wasn't entertainment. It was just sad." Lorraine's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Sophie looked down at her notes, suddenly fascinated by them. James stared at the floor. Eugene walked toward the studio exit, his posture straight, his dignity intact. As he reached the edge of the set, a production assistant stepped forward, looking uncertain. "Mr. Levy, I'm so sorry," the young woman stammered. Eugene placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. You did your job beautifully. Thank you for your kindness." Back on the set, Lorraine had found her voice again. "Well," she said, trying to inject some authority back into her tone, "I suppose we've just witnessed a rather dramatic display. Eugene Levy, everyone, showing us all that he can't handle a real conversation." But the audience wasn't buying it. The applause had stopped, but it was replaced by something worse, an uncomfortable silence mixed with scattered boos. Actual boos, on a morning talk show. James tried to salvage the situation. Let's take a quick break and come back with our next segment about, healthy breakfast options." "We're not breaking." Lorraine snapped at him. "We're continuing the show." "Lorraine, I think we should," Sophie said quietly, her earlier confidence completely gone. "I said we're not breaking," Lorraine repeated, louder this time. She turned to the audience with a forced smile. "Now, I know that might have seemed uncomfortable, but sometimes guests just can't handle honest discussion. It's unfortunate when a professional can't maintain their composure on live television." A voice from the audience called out, "He was completely composed. You were horrible to him." Lorraine's eyes flashed as she tried to locate the speaker. "Security, someone needs to handle that." More voices joined in. "She's right. That was awful. You ambushed him. Poor Eugene." The segment producer was frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but Lorraine ignored him, determined to regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please," she said, her voice strained. "Let's all calm down and remember that this is my show and I'll conduct interviews however I see fit." James leaned over and whispered something to her, urgent and quick. Lorraine's face tightened even more, if that was possible. "What do you mean the phones are lighting up?" she hissed back at him, though the microphones caught it. Sophie tried to smooth things over, addressing the camera directly. "I think emotions were running high on all sides. Perhaps we all could have handled that better." "I handled it perfectly fine," Lorraine snapped at her. Eugene Levy walked out because he couldn't deal with a few pointed questions. That's on him, not on us. But even as she said it, there was a desperate edge to her voice. The confidence from earlier in the interview had completely evaporated, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. The audience wasn't settling down. If anything, they were getting more vocal in their support of Eugene and their disapproval of how the interview had been conducted. An older woman in the third row stood up. "I've been watching your show for years, Lorraine, and I'm disgusted by what I just saw. That man came here in good faith, and you treated him abominably." "Security," Lorraine called out again. "We need to escort that woman out." "You'll do no such thing," the woman replied firmly. "I'm leaving on my own because I don't want to be part of this anymore." She gathered her belongings and walked toward the exit, and several other audience members stood up to join her. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the disintegration of Lorraine's control over her own show. The professional veneer she'd maintained for years was cracking in real time, broadcast to millions of viewers. James and Sophie exchanged glances, both looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. The segment producer was making cutting motions across his throat, desperate to end this disaster, but Lorraine was frozen in her chair, watching her audience walk out. We're going to just... Everyone stay calm," Lorraine stammered, all her earlier authority gone. "We'll be right back after these messages." Finally, mercifully, the show cut to commercial. But the damage was done. In the span of one interview, Lorraine Kelly had managed to turn what should have been a pleasant morning chat into a masterclass in how not to treat a guest. Eugene Levy, meanwhile, had demonstrated something far more valuable: the courage to stand up for himself with grace, the wisdom to know when to walk away, and the kind of quiet dignity that no amount of aggressive questioning could diminish. The control room erupted into chaos. Producers shouted into headsets. The director held her head in her hands. And somewhere in the building, Eugene Levy was probably being escorted to his car, relieved to be free of the toxic environment he'd just escaped. On the set, as the commercial break continued, Lorraine sat in silence. James had pulled out his phone and was frantically scrolling, his face growing paler by the second. "It's already online," he muttered. "The clips are everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Everyone's talking about it." "What are they saying?" Sophie asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. James looked up, his expression grim. "They're saying Eugene Levy is a class act and that Lorraine ambushed him. The comments are, 'They're not good, Lorraine. They're really not good.'" Lorraine grabbed his phone and started reading, her face cycling through expressions of shock, anger, and something that might have been fear. "They can't. This isn't fair," she said, her voice small. "I was just doing my job. I was asking challenging questions. You were being cruel," Sophie said quietly. "We all were. I went along with it, and I shouldn't have. That was wrong. Don't you dare turn on me now," Lorraine hissed at her. "We're a team. We stick together." Sophie shook her head slowly. "No, Lorraine, what we did in that interview wasn't teamwork. It was bullying, and I'm ashamed that I participated in it." A production assistant approached nervously. "Lorraine, we're back from commercial in 30 seconds. Do you want to address what happened or move on to the next segment?" Lorraine stared at her blankly, seeming unable to make a decision. The confident, commanding host from earlier had completely disappeared. 20 seconds, the assistant prompted. "I don't. What should I?" Lorraine started, then stopped. "Just tell me what to do." James looked at her in surprise. In all the years they'd worked together, he'd never heard her sound so uncertain, so vulnerable, so completely lost. 10 seconds. The assistant counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2. The red light on the camera came back on, and Lorraine was live again. She opened her mouth, but for a long moment, nothing came out. The seconds ticked by. Dead air on live television. Every moment of silence more damning than the last. Finally, she found words. "Welcome back to the show. As you saw before the break, Eugene Levy chose to leave our interview. We'll be moving on now to our next segment." But her voice lacked conviction. Her hands trembled slightly as she shuffled her notes. And when she tried to smile at the camera, it looked more like a grimace. The rest of the show limped along, each segment feeling more forced than the last. James and Sophie contributed when required, but without their usual enthusiasm. The audience that remained sat in stony silence, their earlier warmth replaced by judgment. When the show finally ended, Lorraine remained seated long after the camera stopped rolling. The studio emptied around her, crew members packing up equipment, audience members filing out without the usual chatter, James and Sophie disappearing without saying goodbye. She sat there in the empty studio, still in her host chair, surrounded by the detritus of what had once been a successful morning show. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages, calls, notifications, but she didn't look at it. She already knew what they would say. Meanwhile, Eugene Levy was in a car heading away from the studio. He stared out the window, processing what had just happened. His phone was buzzing too, but with messages of support from colleagues, friends, and fans who had already seen the clips online. His publicist called, voice tight with concern. "Eugene, I just saw what happened. Are you okay? Do you want to make a statement?" Eugene thought for a moment. "No statement," he said finally. "What happened in that interview speaks for itself. I don't need to add anything to it." "The internet is really rallying behind you," his publicist continued. "Everyone's praising how you handled it. But Lorraine's show, they might try to spin this against you." "Let them try," Eugene replied, his voice tired but calm. "I know what happened. Everyone who watched knows what happened. The truth doesn't need me to defend it." Back in the studio, a producer approached Lorraine's chair. "We need to clear the set for this afternoon's taping. You should probably head home." Lorraine looked up at him as if seeing him for the first time. "This afternoon's taping? We're still doing the show?" The producer's expression was uncomfortable. "For now, yes. But there's going to be a meeting with the executives. They want to discuss what happened." Lorraine stood up slowly, her legs unsteady. She walked off the set without another word, her earlier confidence nothing but a memory. The morning had started with her in complete control, the queen of her domain, ready to conduct another interview. It was ending with her world in pieces, all because she'd forgotten the most basic rule of being a good host: treat your guests with respect. Eugene Levy had reminded her of that rule in the most public way possible. Not through anger or retaliation, but simply by refusing to accept less than the dignity he deserved. He'd walked away with his head high, his reputation intact, and the support of millions who recognized courage and grace when they saw it. The contrast between the two couldn't have been starker. One had chosen kindness, even in the face of hostility. The other had chosen cruelty and was now dealing with the consequences. As Eugene's car merged into traffic, moving him further from the studio and the uncomfortable morning behind him, he felt a strange sense of peace. He'd stood up for himself without losing his temper, without matching the negativity that had been thrown at him, without becoming something he wasn't. In his decades in the entertainment industry, he'd learned many lessons, but perhaps the most important one, the one he demonstrated so clearly that morning, was this: you never have to accept being treated poorly, no matter who's doing the treating or how public the forum. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. And that's exactly what Eugene Levy did.